A wonderfully successful collaboratory in all kinds of ways, and one of the most fundamental aspects of it, which I think led many of the participants to think about emotions in a very different kind of way, was the range of speakers. They really came from all kinds of disciplines, those disciplines that you might automatically assume and are part of the centre, like literature and history, but also a number of wonderful presentations about Indigenous songs. And the way in which they structure emotions and the way in which they talk about emotions, and I think that led to a very interesting discussion across disciplines. And then on top of that, there were films and discussions of reality TV and how that looks at the manufacture of emotions, and that helped us all to think, I think, in new kinds of ways about what we're doing historically and what the differences are between looking at historical material and different periods, and I suppose also different cultures and societies, and the way in which they talk about, possibly frame emotions, the differences between what the psychologists, and there were a number of presentations by psychologists as well, the way in which psychologists talk about primary emotions and blended emotions and so on, and trying to use that material in our own specific individual research. It was really an extremely engaging 2 days in which people from quite different areas, also theatrical and performance studies, I forgot to mention, were looking at this common theme from their own disciplinary perspectives.
My co-presenter, Miff Turpin, and I were a little bit, not exactly apprehensive, but just not quite certain about what our topic really would have to contribute to something about the history of emotions in medieval and early modern Europe. But I have to say that I think Juanita and the rest of the programming team put together a fantastic program that made us feel totally at home and really sparked a lot of food for thought, I think, both for our own work, but also in seeing some really fruitful new perspectives on ways that we could collaborate across the different disciplines involved.
And it's hard to answer what was the standout, because I really enjoyed it all so very much. And I think perhaps what I particularly enjoyed were the sort of such very different perspectives on emotion. Different emotions, but also very different theories of emotion, different takes on emotion from such a variety of different cultures, and I guess that's about it really. And it's been a pleasure to be here, and it's not over yet.
Okay, well, it was a wonderful day. I've been here, and the whole conference itself has been a fantastic experience of particularly exchanging cultures and specialists who don't normally come into interaction with each other, and I am now fully aware of just how important it is to include discussion of emotions in broader cultural discourse as something which can be relevant whether you're looking at Indigenous culture, looking at medieval, early modern culture, or contemporary SBS reality shows. It's a continuous world, and I'm very glad.
What really impressed me about the conference has been the breadth of expertise in such a variety of disciplines. From engineering to psychology to literature to history, and how they complemented each other just so well. And I think each one of us felt that we wanted to go back and rework our own material to reflect what we'd learned over the couple of days. So it was really, really productive for me.
Really great opportunity to talk about what we're trying to do at SBS with a programme like Go Back to Where You Came From. And I think in this context, a multidisciplinary event where you're talking about emotions, which are absolutely at the heart of the programme, this seemed like really the ideal place to talk about what we're trying to do. We're trying to engage audiences in an emotional way with a really tricky topic, so fantastic forum for us.
What I found so exciting and enriching about this collaboratory was the sense we got of the immense cultural differences in the way emotions are understood and produced on a very basic level, the level of what we take to be an emotion, how we think it should be expressed, how we think it can be detected. I thought one of the most interesting papers in this regard was the paper on Aboriginal song, where it's very clear that the songs are full of emotion, but they're not primarily emotions that are well understood in Western culture. They're not expressed through faces, they're expressed through dance. They're not held to come directly out of the inner person of the being, instead they tend to come through the land and from the spirits. But that in turn makes them, it seems to me, often very hard to detect by standard modern psychological means of finding out about emotion. And the corollary of that means that we, I think, as historians, have to be very careful not to impose on the past the kinds of assumptions that we would make about emotions. Not to assume, for instance, that boys couldn't understand the emotions of women, because we had that wonderful plenary speech yesterday talking about how young schoolboys in the Middle Ages, as an exercise, had to try and think themselves into the roles of women like Dido and Niobe and think through that lament and that anguish and express it publicly. Now, it seems to me that that makes our work as the centre so much more important, so much more wide-ranging, so much more so much newer and more original, if we can actually say, let's question every assumption that we've made about the history of emotions, what they are, how they're expressed, what emotional regimes are. Let's see if we can build that understanding new for the Middle Ages.